Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. And just a heads up for this one today, I think of all the things that we can focus on as surfers, as longboarders, this is probably one of the most important things because it affects everything. I think we all know what we're talking about when we speak about the sweet spot on the board, where the board's going as fast as it can and things just feel right. But today I wanted to speak about getting to the sweet spot on the wave. We're going to cast away any uncertainties surrounding this and get you doing something that will drastically improve your surfing, improve your longboarding. And to do this today, we're going to be analysing some footage that I have of myself to show you exactly what you need to be doing to implement this correctly and how this is being used in my own surfing as well. And I'm stoked to see how this goes for everyone. And if you are new here, my name's Ben Considine and I'm a longboard enthusiast, competitor, coach, and I'm here to share my learnings and experiences like this one today with you all. So if you do enjoy the video and get something from it, please feel free to subscribe. And if you know anyone who might do the same and get a bit from it, feel free to share it with them too. But let's get straight into the edit. Now, just before we go into the step-by-step process of exactly how to implement this for your own surfing, it's important that we understand that this applies for surfers and longboarders across all ability levels, with beginners needing to use this to open up the opportunity for speed and maneuvers, and more advanced surfers using this to refine their use of energy and speed on the wave. I even attended a coaching talk a little while back where they were still focusing on how high up the wave you needed to be for speed and energy efficiency for professionals competing at the highest levels. And the key takeaway, we can almost never be too high on the wave. So for our beginner to intermediates, it's really about getting to the top third of the wave. And for our more experienced surfers, it's about utilizing and executing maneuvers at the very top part of the wave, more and more, better and better. And this is where I'm at with my surfing at the moment. Alright guys, so let's dive into this approach now and exactly how to do this for yourself. Now, the first thing I did want to highlight here is why, when we're watching some really good surfers, why we can make such a big emphasis on focusing on the maneuvers that they're doing over the positioning, which again, as we spoke about before, can be quite subtle and intricate. So for example, this wave here of mine, I start off with an immediate bottom turn into a drop knee, which I could have even been a little bit higher for now that I'm looking back on it. And then exiting the drop knee, I quickly snap onto the tail to draw myself up the wave for the nose ride. Then there's this weird stalling sort of maneuver that I'm doing here. But if you look at it, there's a very high percentage of the wave that is ridden in that top third of the wave, or at least the top half of the wave. And whilst this is easy to miss, it's not by chance. And I believe that this is the main thing distinguishing our surfing between different competency levels. Okay, so for step one in getting into the sweet spot of the wave and making sure that we're harnessing the most for the wave's speed and avoiding the flats, it all starts with the eyes. So too often, what I usually see, especially when we're focusing on certain maneuvers, is that we're looking down toward our board. Now this can be anywhere from paddling into the wave and then popping up and looking straight down instead of looking ahead, or even when we're making turns happen, we're looking down as well. Now, I want to try and get us into the habit and the framework of looking where we want to be going, because oftentimes I find that just this little correction can do a lot for people in terms of success surfing to different points in the wave, which is an important part of their surfing, but also execution of maneuvers and things like that. So the cue here will be to look where you want to be, and our eyes for this instance, because we want to draw ourselves up onto that top third, they're going to be looking ahead and to the top crest of the wave. We want to be landing in that very top third of the wave, so that's where we want our eyes to be. That's step number one. Now, step two here is going to be actually engaging the rail, and there's a specific cue that I like to use for this and I think works really well. The external cue that I like to use is actually using the hand and putting that backhand into the wall of the wave, or at least close to. When we put the hand in this position, it inadvertently leans ourselves over that inside rail so that we're going to be putting more weight there, and then our board will slightly tilt and drive up the face of the wave. You can think of this as like a little bottom turn. So again, we're going to be coming from the bottom to the top with this tilt. Now, you might see a lot of longboarders, again, with their dialed down kind of expression on the wave and the approach. They won't use their arms a lot. This is just an initial cue that I really like to get people used to what it feels like to engage the rail early after the pop-up. So with pop-up, eyes will come up to the crest of the wave, and our left hand if you're a goofy footer, or your right hand for a natural footer, will come down to touch the wave beside your rail. Once you are used to this, again, you can just use your feet to engage that side of the rail and that lean over that rail to drive yourself up. But again, I wouldn't cue this initially, because I think that external cue of the hand can be really, really useful in the early stages. The other thing I would say about this is we don't want to do this too low on the wave. So if you're coming down with your pop-up and you reach the flats before you look up and engage your hand into the water for this tilting of the rail, then everything's going to become really, really slow. We don't want to hit the flats of the wave before we engage the turn. We want to engage it beforehand. Now, step 3 is going to be establishing a counterbalance up the board to break the upward trajectory that our board is taking. As we engage the inside hand towards the water to engage the inside rail, you'll notice that the board will now have an upward trajectory towards the top of the wave, which is exactly what we want. But again, the next step that is often missed and makes things a little bit complicated is where we continue that upward trajectory off the face of the wave, or where we do go too high before we establish this counterbalance, and then we lose all of the speed on the wave because we haven't harnessed that speed at the top third. So what we want to be doing, I like to liken this to what we do with the eyes as well. The eyes are used to look at where we want to be, not where we are. We have to anticipate where the board is going, and before we get there, we need to make sure that we're actually bringing our weight forward. So instead of over the tail, now over our front foot. A lot of the time in more advanced surfers, you'll see people use a cross step for this. So they'll come from the tail after they've engaged their little bottom turn, and they'll actually cross 2 steps to the middle of the board. But the most important thing is that we anticipate where we're going. So we don't want to hit the top of the wave and then lean forwards. As our board's making the upward trajectory towards the top of the wave, that's where we actually want to, once we get to the midpoint of the wave, lean forwards. It'll take time for the weight to be transitioned from the back foot to the front foot, and for then that board to even out. So you do want to make sure that you do this at about the midpoint of the wave as you're ascending, to make sure that, again, we're not too late and we're not losing the wave. And this weight forwards on the front foot, or that cross step into the center of the board at this time, is really, really important, because we know that if we want to be in the sweet point on the wave, we've also got to be in the sweet point on the board. This is how we're going to harness all of the speed, and there's no use really being in the top third of the wave if we're just going to slow the board down on the tail, unless of course we're executing a maneuver where we need to be around that pivot point. So coming from the bottom turn that we spoke about in step 2, we're now going to lean forwards or cross step into the center third of the board as we hit that midpoint. And then you'll notice it'll have a bit of a seesaw effect, and that nose will slowly drop down, and the nose will then be angling down the shoulder and towards the bottom of the wave then. As a little side tangent here as well, this is probably something that is quite familiar when we place it in this context. So you'll often see people coming from a bottom turn and then cross-stepping 2 cross steps into the middle of the board, followed by another 2 steps, 2 nose rides. So this is a really typical framework for setting up the nose ride, which we can go through in another video if that would help. And so if you've gotten to this stage already, this is a really good place to be. But a lot of the time we think that this is where it stops, and cool, we're in the top third and we're going to stay there. But as we kind of found, that board flattens out as we step into the middle third of the board, or as we lean forward. So it's no longer got that upward trajectory. It's going downwards and across the shoulder. And very, very rarely will the board go perfectly straight in the top third of the wave. And in fact, the way that we sort of harness the wave speed is by leaning forwards, is by descending the wave, and then repeating this process. So the 4th step here is going to be resetting. So once we have established our weight forwards at the top of the wave, we'll be heading in a negative trajectory down the wave, and we want to reset with our step number 2 again. We know that for step number 2, we use that external cue of the hand coming down towards the water. We get nice and low, make sure that our eyes are, again, looking towards the top of the wave. But we want to make sure that we're engaging that rail, so using the hand to come touch the water before we hit the flats, just like we spoke about at the start, because again, we're in kind of no man's land if we hit the flats and then we lose all of our speed. So we actually want to use that bottom curve of the wave to put our board onto its rail rather than doing it once it's there. So what we've got to do here is anticipate where the board is heading. And I would say another good rule of thumb is that when the board hits the halfway point of the wave, that's where we can then start to drop that backhand into the water, look where we want to be, so at the top of the wave. And because it takes a bit of time for the board to transition its weight and the board onto the rail in this way, you're going to see a nice little S-carve down and then up the wave. So this is the reset, and then we just keep using this on the wave. I'd say this is something that's really good to focus on in and of itself. Again, if we're just focusing on maneuvers, a lot of the time we don't put ourselves in the right part of the wave and we don't harness speed properly. And like we spoke about in the introduction here, this is one of the biggest things that does differentiate the sort of beginner to intermediate to advanced surfer, how they're able to harness speed on the wave and the positions that they put themselves in. But if you can get this really, really good and really, really confident with it, and this just becomes a normal part of your surfing, that's where everything with regards to nose rides and turns is going to become so much easier, because we're not going to need to play catch up and learn how to position our board correctly again. We can use what we already know and then execute these turns and nose rides even better. So those steps right there, so step 1, eyes, step 2, external cue of the hand to engage the rail, and then we can dwindle that out of the picture later. Step 3, making sure we can offer that counterweight by leaning forwards or cross-stepping forwards into the middle of the board so that we're in the middle at the top of the wave, and then having that reset as step number 4. Really important to transition us, especially from those beginner to intermediate stages, and to really level up your intermediate surfing as well. But for more advanced surfers, as we spoke about before, this is something that is still focused on with the highest level of surfers. So in terms of what we're doing, how this can really enhance our surfing, it's making sure that we are using the sweet spot as efficiently and effectively as possible. Oftentimes it's just being in this top third of the wave, even higher than you think you might need to be, and also executing maneuvers in the top part of the wave as well. So this top third of the wave is going to be a really, really important part, and we just need to keep refining our skill in getting this and getting to this point more consistently across a range of maneuvers, as well as just for trim speed and everything like that. So we will leave it there for today. If any of you have any questions for that one, please leave those in the comments below. But hope you're all getting waves, and we'll catch you on the next one.